first day. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start by basically. I mean, I already know the type of game I want to make, but I'll spend the day basically playing a couple of those games and trying to get the details of the things that I want to do based on it. So it's going to be a survivor-like game for multiple reasons. One of them being that I've played a couple of them already. I mean a bunch of them actually, and I enjoy them. So that's one of them. And I always end up saying that they're not that hard to make, and they're fun. And it's one of those games that I really like the idea of. Games that you can start playing very, very early on. So as soon as you have, a character movement and, first character, first attack, and first enemy, you can have like a bunch of them spawn and you got a game, right? To some extent. And I really like that. I really like the idea of having something that you can play very early on and then start expanding from it. So what today we're going to do is we're going to play a bunch of survivor games and write down the things I like, the things I don't like. And while doing that, we're going to think of a theme, right? Whether we want to have it set in a medieval fantasy setting or we want it to have it set on, cyberpunk or whatever we can do. Now, my idea as well with this is an idea that I've had for a while, is that I would like to make this game the first of many in a specific IP to some extent. So of course, I mean, I am a one single developer, so nothing is going to be amazing. But I've had this idea of creating. Well, I've wanted to create an IP, a world, quote unquote world, for a while, and I've always thought that it would be fun to create an IP, and kind of expand on it by making different games. And basically, the idea is to slowly create a game, like to have like a very simple game, and over time, just add details to it. So instead of doing like Tolkien or others where they create a massive world, they spend ages just creating a massive world and then make a story for it. I kind of want to do the opposite, in the sense that obviously I do think of a specific theme and a specific set of rules, very simple set of rules maybe at the beginning, but then as I make stories, as I make games, I add stuff to it, right? So it would just be, I don't know, let's say we decide to go for a medieval fantasy game. So we would start by, that would be kind of like the main setting, right? Then we would start with this game. We would do, I don't know, when we create the first character, first playable character, and the first enemy, we decide to have skeletons. So there you go, we've set a thing for the game where like living skeletons, exist in that game, kind of thing, right? And then we can go further as to how magic works, depending on how much magic we add into the game or whatever. So anyways, back to the idea at hand. So I want to make a survivor. I want to have many enemies. I've looked into, I'll be using Unity, just in case you were wondering. That's basically what I use for most things. I'm very comfortable with it. And and so I looked into it a little bit, and from what I've seen, I should avoid using Unity animations, so Unity controllers, animated controllers and stuff. I mean, you can see the animations in this are basically like rotations, which I should probably be able to do that quite easily. Especially you can see even the shadow rotates as well. It's not an actual shadow, it's like the sprite has a shadow. And it's slight scale changes, so I'll probably do stuff like that as well. So I'll probably have to make my own animation system, which the only thing it's going to do is probably switch between like 2 or even 3 sprites. I'm not going to do it like harder than that. It's going to be quite simple, because the idea again is going to be having many of enemies on the screen and not and the other thing is Vampire Survivor, basically if you look at the map, you could think that the map is finite, but it's actually infinite. But personally, like, I don't think it adds anything to the game. Like, as long as the map is big enough that you don't run into the walls often, like, because you have to go back to pick up the XP anyways, you will end up kind of going in a circle. Like right now I've been playing for a bit and I'm still like in the beginning area where I just spawned. So having the map infinite is not really something, because the thing about having infinite maps is that the rounding errors and shit, which can be quite annoying. Obviously you do have to run like very far, but still. So to avoid that, I'm just not going to make it infinite. I think it's a lot easier. So one of the things I do like about Vampire Survivor Like having stuff in the map specifically to force you to kind of do something is not necessarily something I like, but something I really like is the bosses. And another thing that people might not notice very easily is that, like, if I leave the boss and he is gonna despawn, he's actually gonna despawn and gonna appear at the bottom somewhere, I believe. Game, please. Well, there you go. It appeared at the top, but it definitely was not at the position where it was. So this is something that makes it look, it's quite nice because it makes it look like there's a ton of enemies, even though technically as soon as an enemy is not on the screen, it's just despawned and it spawns somewhere else. So then there's going to be a couple that arrive back, but it's not necessarily the same ones. Like this one again was not in the position where I left it. Which is very nice because, again, it makes it look like there's a lot of enemies, but you're just reusing all of them. Of course, you're going to have to use pools anyways, because there's no way to do it otherwise. The synergies between items, I don't like that they're usually hidden, because it just, I don't know, I don't like that too much, personally. Then I really like the idea of, well, the bosses. I don't know if I specifically mentioned it, because it kind of makes, out of all of the enemies, it makes kind of like a target. It creates a target, so you're no longer just running around aimlessly, but you're specifically aiming at something, which I think is quite cool. Having these things that drop health and stuff, it's fine, but it's not necessarily amazing. I'd rather have just normal enemies potentially drop stuff. So I guess, yeah, let's talk about the theme that I'd like to do. I'm not exactly sure what. I mean, I've been wanting to make a steampunk world for a while as well. I mean, obviously the art, I will have to do it myself. At first I'm gonna get like random stuff, and then slowly like random assets online. And steampunk tends to be a little bit more complicated to find stuff, but like I really like it, and I really feel like it's not being used much. Like Dishonored is steampunk, and Bioshock kind of as well. But the problem with both of those games, I mean, Bioshock Infinite is slightly different, but usually is that they're coupled with very dark ideas most of the time. You know, dark worlds are fine, but you know, I like more lively, more fun things, you know? And more kind of, like a good example is more like Skyrim or the Elder Scrolls in general, which the world looks very nice on the surface, and then there's always like bad stuff happening, which is fine, right? But at least on the surface it looks good. But if you look at Dishonored, there's no way, you know, you can't look at it and think it's fine. It's just completely, the world is very, very dark. Everything's going bad, like there's play going on, it's extremely corrupted, etc., right? So the way I see it, the way I'd like to do a steampunk-ish world is slightly, a little bit more like the Arcane League of Legends show. And I guess there's two parts to that as well. So there's the like overworld and the underworld. And obviously the way that I kind of feel like doing it more is like the overworld, where everything seems a lot cleaner and stuff, but it's still very nice. Of course there is you know, corruption and stuff, but that's hidden at least. And I feel like there's no world that is just happy stuff. And I think it removes also, like if you're gonna make, so this is something I'll definitely do. Maybe not like this, but I'll definitely have some kind of progression outside of the game. So like I was saying, the problem with having a only happy world is that it doesn't add like where, you know, what are you doing as a hero, right? In a world like that, you're not really doing anything. If everything is going well, they don't need heroes. But the idea is that the bad stuff is gonna be hidden. Like you're gonna start investigating some kind of stuff and slowly realize, oh, actually this goes deeper than I thought. And of course, yeah, in this type of game, I will focus on the bad stuff, but I could, in the sense that if I'm going to make a lot of enemies, then all the enemies are technically going to be bad. Unless I'm the bad one. I guess that could work as well. I guess I could think of it a little bit more as like a cyber psycho in Cyberpunk, where I'm like the bad one and everyone's trying to get me. So if we take Arcane as a baseline, what we could do is having some kind of character whose only purpose is to get stronger. And he's doing like all kinds of enhancement, like drugs, prosthetics and stuff that make him stronger. And like potions and stuff. And then I guess we could be like I get it. Say one of the nice worlds examples like that is one of the episodes in Love, Death and Robot where you follow like a kid who's helping his father, who's a magical creature hunter of some kind. But then they kind of tell you that the world is changing. It's becoming, with technology, people don't turn into like towards magic anymore. And then, you follow him when he's older, and you go to kind of like a city, like a kind of steampunk city. Very nice looking, which again looks very nice on the surface, but when you look at it deeper, you realize that everything's very, very corrupted. And in that episode, like the guy is some kind of crafter who makes like steampunk robotics, I guess. So I guess that could work well as prosthetics and implants, I guess. And what I like about that world as well is that it mixes steampunk with magic as well. And that's kind of how I would like to do it as well. Because it allows for, doing stuff that are not necessarily applicable, doesn't necessarily make sense. Because if you look at the idea of steampunk is mostly everything's powered by steam engines, right? So obviously there's just so much you can do with that. But if you pair it with magic, then suddenly there's a lot more possibilities. The first of which just making very small and powerful steam engines, which is technically quite hard. Like Vampire Survivor is very much a baseline. Like at the end of the day, it's quite simple in the sense that you have like just a bunch of enemies coming. You do have a bunch of pickups, which is nice. That kind of spice up the gameplay. And then the base mechanic is that you can have up to 6 active abilities and 6 passive items that then you improve. And then on top of that, they add the idea of chests. They add the idea of bosses, which I really like. And the other thing that it does, which I think is quite nice, is that it doesn't simply spawn stuff randomly. They use a somewhat of a wave system, which I believe is simply based on time. And then sometimes things spawn in specific patterns, which is quite nice. In the first map, you have the patterns of like the plants that surround you, and it kind of slowly squeeze you, and it's an enemy that has lots of health. So at that point, you'll probably not be able to kill them that easily. You have to wait until they despawn automatically, which is nice. But yeah, outside of that, could be some steam robot going. I mean, I guess the advantage of this is we can have multiple enemies, multiple characters as well. So if we do that, then what it would have to do is the enemies that you're fighting would range from like city guards to like army to like bounty hunters and stuff like that. I think that might be. I guess we could do like not just humanoids, but also like the whatever. Already humanoids, depending on the weapon they're using, is going to be interesting. But then we could also have like tank-ish looking stuff. Let's go back to this. So definitely what I like is chests and how to write that? Just specific targets, I guess. So boss-like or mini-boss-like enemies, I guess. And bosses would be nice. Is there anything that I specifically dislike from Vampire Survivor? I mean, I guess the combination stuff is a bit iffy. But it's not something that I completely dislike. I guess they're reusing the same enemies all the time. Same enemy, that's the specified same enemy stat changes. And I guess for World theme, we're kind of going steampunk, arcane, overworld specific, arcane show, and you are the bad guy. And one of the things about this game, which is that a lot of the time you're mostly just changing basic stats. You're not adding abilities. I guess the good thing of doing a theme like steampunk is that it also allows for guns. Because if you do fantasy and medieval fantasy, they don't really have that much long range unless you go magic. And one of the things that I wanted to do when creating a world is that I wanted to try to make a world that has magic, but it's not like all over the place. So this is one thing that I do find interesting from this game. Health as a resource, I guess, that you can spend as well. Because there's some abilities that also make it so you attack faster if you're low on health. So instead of being like a Vampire Survivor in most game where health is just there to prevent you from dying in one shot kind of way, here it's more you can use it as a resource. Like a lot of the mechanics are based on that. So I wouldn't do it like this completely, where I would focus only on the main ability, but I think it is quite nice. I would have more stuff maybe that shoots. But I do like it. The character you choose has a lot of importance. And there is a clear difference between the stuff you get in chests and the stuff you get when you level up, which is, I think, something I like as well. So yeah, like abilities based on main character, on character's mechanics. What is it that I don't like? Only attack when not moving. So what I would do, if you do have some kind of guy with a bow and arrow or like whatever weapon, I guess. The thing is, if you're using realistically, if you're using a weapon. If you don't move, you gain accuracy, but you can still shoot. So I guess what you could do is simply reduce accuracy or reduce attack speed when you're moving, and that's it, right? You don't necessarily have to completely stop the movement, I guess. But I'm gonna add another thing, which is gonna be extras. One-on-one bosses. Because that's the thing. Like the big difference there is that it completely it removes everything else. Suddenly you're just one-on-one on bosses. Suddenly the fun thing about that is that because you're one-on-one, you no longer have issues based on performance. So you can have tons of shit and ton of interesting mechanics on the boss itself. In the other normal situation, you're just having to have very simple mechanics because, well, you want to have many enemies on the screen. So then the more mechanics you add to that, the more complex it becomes. Alright, that's cool. So this is the thing. The thing interesting about this game is that it works with a skill tree. Oh, very interesting. Okay, I like this. We're making little events. So if I kill stuff in that circle, it counts. Again, the main performance issue with these games is the enemies themselves. So having stuff around it doesn't necessarily having one object that takes care of that shouldn't necessarily be that complex. I guess it definitely has the idea of being very specific to the character that you're playing because of the skill tree thing. I like the fact that the game kind of stops every once in a while and gives you upgrades by itself. And this game doesn't really do that much. So here you can choose both the character and the starting weapon. Okay, I have to shoot myself. Okay. It has the Enter the Gungeon reload animation, which is nice. You can see the enemies, which is something that I was looking into as well. They don't perfectly collide. They do kind of go inside each other, but they kind of bounce back. And then you can see that when you have a lot of them touching each other, the movement backwards kind of propagates naturally. So it feels like they're doing the game a little bit how I wanted to do it, which is doing it with non-dynamic rigid bodies, using kinematic rigid bodies, and probably doing the collisions himself by just pushing the enemies back, I guess. I like the aesthetic, very monochromatic outside of the red. And you can see the difference from this to the bounty of 1 is this: you can move at a certain speed, but while you're shooting, it moves slower. And I definitely like that a lot more. Ideas from this. While shooting, reduce other stat. And the other thing, there's also the discussion, I guess, of whether to go it automatically fires or to do it 10 minutes still dawn. I guess I do like the idea. Slowly turn to night. Another thing I like, I didn't write it, but it's kind of obvious, is progression between runs. So I guess we are going for steampunk. Yeah, that was it for today. Yeah, by the way, the idea, of course, I've got nothing now, but the idea is that we'll start uploading the game to itch as it's being developed. Probably not after next stream, but after maybe a couple of extra streams, I'll start uploading it to itch so you guys can play it as well. But anyways, so we'll potentially start. Although I would like to have better visuals if we do upload it to Twitch. I mean, just to itch. We'll see what we do exactly. I will look at this as well. Steampunk defense game looks interesting, and I probably can steal a couple of ideas from there. So yeah, thanks for watching, and come back next time, I guess. Goodbye.